Picture someone making $35,000 a year. They're stretched thin, checking their bank balance before buying groceries, feeling that familiar tightness in their chest every time rent is due. Now picture that same person 5 years later, making $90,000 a year, almost 3 times as much money. Here's the question that should stop you in your tracks. Are they relaxed now? Do they finally feel rich? In a huge number of cases, the honest answer is no. They're still checking their bank balance. They're still feeling that tightness. The number changed dramatically, but the feeling barely moved at all. This isn't a rare exception. It's one of the most well-documented, most quietly devastating patterns in personal finance, and almost nobody warns you about it before it happens to you. You assume more income will eventually deliver the relief you're chasing. You picture a future version of yourself, finally calm, finally secure, finally able to breathe. And then you arrive at that income, the one you used to dream about, and somehow, the relief isn't there waiting for you. So what's actually going on? Why does earning more money so often fail to make people feel rich? The answer isn't really about money at all. It's about something happening quietly inside your brain, something almost every income bracket experiences, from the person making $40,000 a year to the person making $400,000 a year. Once you understand this pattern, you'll start noticing it in your own life immediately. In your friends' lives, in that coworker who got the big promotion and somehow still seems stressed about money 6 months later. And once you see it clearly, you finally get the tools to escape it. Here's the belief almost everyone carries around, usually without ever questioning it. Once I make more money, I'll finally feel secure. It feels obvious. It feels almost too simple to even need stating. More income equals more security equals more peace of mind. That's the equation most of us run on autopilot, from our first job all the way through every raise and promotion that follows. But here's the strange part. If you ask people at almost any income level whether they feel financially secure right now, a huge percentage of them, even ones earning what would have sounded like an enormous amount of money to their younger selves, will tell you they still feel stretched, still feel behind, still feel like security is one more raise away. Think about someone who just landed their first real job out of school making $45,000 a year. To their broke college self, that number sounds incredible, pure freedom. And for a little while, it does feel that way. New apartment, new furniture, eating out without anxiety for the first time. But within a year or two, something shifts. The apartment that once felt luxurious now feels like the bare minimum. The new furniture is just furniture now. The freedom that number once represented quietly faded, even though the number itself never went down. Now picture that same person 5 years later, earning $70,000. Logically, that should feel like enormous progress. And for a brief moment, it does. But the apartment is bigger now too, the car is nicer, the subscriptions have multiplied, the dinners out happen more often and at slightly nicer restaurants. The number went up, but somehow, the feeling of being financially comfortable barely budged. This is the trap almost nobody sees coming, because it doesn't feel like a trap while it's happening. It feels like normal life. It feels like simply enjoying the fruits of hard work. And in small doses, it absolutely is. But there's a deeper psychological mechanism driving this entire pattern. One that explains why income alone, no matter how high it climbs, rarely delivers the lasting sense of security people expect from it. Let's break this down piece by piece, because each layer reveals something a little more surprising than the last. There's a concept in psychology that explains almost everything we just talked about. And once you understand it, you'll never think about money the same way again. It's sometimes called the hedonic treadmill, but forget the technical name for a second, and just picture an actual treadmill. Imagine you're walking on a treadmill in a gym. You're moving your legs. You're putting in real effort. Sweat is dripping down your forehead, and yet, you're staying in exactly the same spot. No matter how fast you walk, the scenery in front of you never changes. You can speed up. You can walk faster and faster. But you never actually arrive anywhere, because the treadmill adjusts to match your effort. This is almost exactly what happens with income and lifestyle. As your income rises, your expectations rise right alongside it, almost automatically, almost invisibly. The car that once felt like a major upgrade becomes the new normal within months. The salary that once felt like the answer to all your problems becomes the new baseline you compare everything else against. You're walking faster, earning more, working harder, and the scenery, the actual feeling of being financially comfortable, never seems to get any closer. Here's why this happens. And it's not because you're bad with money or lack discipline. Your brain is wired to compare your current situation to your recent situation, not to some fixed objective standard of enough. Humans are comparison machines. We don't experience our circumstances in isolation. We experience them relative to where we just were, and relative to the people around us. Here's where this becomes incredibly concrete and easy to recognize in your own life. Let's say someone gets a raise. Their income jumps by $1,000 a month. In that exact moment, they have a choice. Although it rarely feels like a conscious choice at all, they could keep their lifestyle exactly the same and let that extra $1,000 build security, savings, investments, breathing room. Or that $1,000 can quietly get absorbed into a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car payment, slightly more frequent takeout, a slightly upgraded version of everything they already had. In practice, for most people, it's not really a deliberate decision. It happens gradually, almost without noticing. The same way a balloon slowly fills with air. Nobody consciously sits down and decides, I will now spend every additional dollar I earn. It just sort of happens, one small upgrade at a time, until one day they look up and realize the extra income disappeared into a slightly bigger version of the same financial stress they had before. Picture two friends, both getting identical raises at the same company, same amount, same timing. One friend keeps their living situation exactly the same and redirects the extra money into savings. The other friend moves into a nicer apartment because, in their words, I can finally afford it now. A year later, the first friend has a meaningful cushion building in the background. The second friend, despite earning the exact same amount, feels just as financially tight as before the raise because their expenses simply rose to match their new income, almost like water finding its level. This is called lifestyle inflation. And it's one of the sneakiest forces in personal finance, precisely because each individual upgrade feels completely reasonable in isolation. Nobody thinks, I'm sabotaging my future security when they upgrade their car or move to a slightly nicer place. They think, I've earned this and I can afford it now. And on its own, that thought is true. The problem isn't any single decision. It's the accumulation of dozens of small, individually reasonable decisions that quietly consume the very income increase that was supposed to create more breathing room. Here's a psychological insight that explains why this treadmill feels so invisible while it's happening. Humans don't evaluate wealth in absolute terms nearly as much as we evaluate it in relative terms. This sounds abstract, so let's make it concrete. Imagine you're offered a choice between two scenarios. In the first scenario, you earn $70,000 a year, and everyone around you, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, earn $60,000 a year. In the second scenario, you earn $90,000 a year, but everyone around you earns $110,000 a year. Even though the second scenario involves significantly more actual money in your pocket, a surprising number of people, when honestly asked, would actually prefer the first scenario. Why? Because feeling ahead of the people around you creates a sense of security and status that raw numbers alone don't fully capture. We don't just want to be financially comfortable. We want to feel financially comfortable relative to our surroundings. This explains something strange that happens constantly in real life. Someone making $80,000 a year in a city where most of their friends make $50,000 often feels wealthy, relaxed, generous, even a little smug about their financial situation. But take that exact same person, same salary, same spending habits, and drop them into a social circle where everyone makes $150,000 a year, and suddenly that same $80,000 feels inadequate. They start feeling behind. Even though their actual financial reality, their bank account, their expenses, their bills, hasn't changed even slightly. This is why moving to a wealthier neighborhood, joining a higher income friend group, or constantly scrolling through social media showing other people's vacations, cars, and renovated kitchens can quietly make you feel poorer, even while your own income keeps climbing. You're not comparing your life to where you started. You're comparing your life to whoever happens to be standing nearest to you at the moment. And that nearest comparison point keeps shifting upward as your circles change. Here's a pattern that shows up almost identically across nearly every income level. And it's worth sitting with for a moment because it explains why just earn more rarely solves the underlying feeling of financial anxiety on its own. Ask someone earning $40,000 a year what amount of income would finally make them feel secure, and they'll often say something like $70,000, reasonable enough. But here's the surprising part. Ask someone who's already earning $70,000 the exact same question, and they'll often say something like 110,000, and ask someone earning 110,000, and the number climbs again. The goalpost doesn't stay fixed. It moves forward at roughly the same pace as the person's actual income. This isn't because these people are ungrateful or greedy. It's because the brain calibrates its sense of enough based on a moving target, not a fixed destination. Picture trying to catch up to your own shadow at sunset. No matter how fast you run toward it, it stays exactly the same distance ahead of you because it's not actually a separate object out there waiting to be caught. It's being generated by you, in real time, stretching forward as you move. Enough works the same way for most people. It's not a fixed number sitting out there in the world waiting to be reached. It's a feeling generated by your brain, recalculated constantly based on your recent experiences, your environment, and your comparisons, which means chasing it through income alone, without addressing the underlying psychology, can genuinely turn into a lifelong chase that never actually arrives anywhere, no matter how much the number on your paycheck grows. Now here's where this gets genuinely hopeful, because not everyone stays stuck on this treadmill forever. Some people, even some who earn relatively modest incomes, manage to feel calm, secure, and genuinely rich in the way that matters most, the internal feeling, not just the external number. What separates them isn't usually a higher income. It's usually a different relationship with the gap between income and spending. Picture two people again, both earning the same amount, let's say $85,000 a year. One person treats every raise, every bonus, every windfall as an automatic upgrade trigger, a bigger place, a nicer car, more frequent treats. The other person treats raises differently. They allow themselves some lifestyle improvement, because life genuinely should get a little better as income grows, but they deliberately keep a meaningful portion of every increase flowing into savings and investments rather than letting it all evaporate into upgraded spending. The second person isn't living a miserable, deprived life. They're not refusing every nice dinner or every vacation. They've simply broken the automatic link between I earn more and I must spend more to match it. And because of that one shift, their gap between income and expenses widens every single year, instead of staying perpetually narrow, which means their savings and investments actually have room to grow, year after year, compounding quietly in the background while their day-to-day life still feels comfortable and enjoyable. This is the actual difference between people who feel like the treadmill never ends and people who eventually step off it entirely. It was never really about the size of their paycheck. It was about the size of the gap they protected between what came in and what went out. Let's pull all of this together into the deeper idea, because this is the part that genuinely reshapes how people think about money for the rest of their lives. The reason earning more money doesn't automatically make you feel rich is that feeling rich was never actually about the number on your paycheck in the first place. It's about the relationship between your income and your expectations. And expectations have a sneaky habit of rising just as fast as income does, sometimes even faster, leaving the actual feeling of security stuck in exactly the same place, no matter how high the number climbs. Here's the psychological truth hiding underneath this entire pattern. Humans don't experience wealth in absolute terms. We experience it as a gap. The distance between what we have and what we expect to have. The distance between our situation and the people we compare ourselves to. The distance between our current lifestyle and our most recent lifestyle. When that gap stays the same size, year after year, the feeling of security stays exactly the same too, even while every number involved keeps getting bigger. Think of it like trying to fill a bathtub that has a drain matching the exact size of the faucet. You can turn the water up as high as you want. You can make the water come out faster and faster. But if the drain widens at the same rate as the faucet, the water level in the tub never actually rises. From the outside, it might look like progress, water rushing in everywhere, lots of activity, lots of motion. But the actual level, the thing that matters, the thing you're trying to raise, stays frozen in place. This is exactly what happens when income rises but spending rises right alongside it at the same pace. The faucet gets bigger, sure, but so does the drain. And the water level, your actual sense of financial security and freedom, never climbs an inch. Here's the part that makes this insight genuinely liberating instead of just depressing. If feeling rich isn't really about the size of the faucet, then the solution was never earn dramatically more money no matter what. The solution is making sure the drain doesn't grow at the same speed as the faucet. Even a modest income, if the gap between earning and spending genuinely widens over time, will eventually produce far more security, far more freedom, and yes, far more of that elusive feeling of being financially comfortable than a much higher income that gets fully absorbed by a lifestyle that grows just as fast. This single reframe explains why some people who earn what sounds like an enormous salary still feel anxious and behind, while some people earning a fraction of that amount feel calm, secure, and genuinely at ease with their finances. It was never really a story about who earns more. It's a story about who manages to keep their drain smaller than their faucet year after year, even as both numbers grow. So what do you actually do with all of this? Especially if you're in your 20s or 30s trying to build real financial security instead of just chasing a number that keeps moving further away. First, get clear on the gap, not just the income. Every time you get a raise, a bonus, or any increase in income, the most important question isn't, what can I finally afford now? It's how much of this can I let flow into savings and investments before I even think about upgrading anything. A simple, common approach many people find genuinely sustainable is directing a meaningful chunk, somewhere around half, of every raise towards savings or investments, while still allowing the other portion to improve your actual day-to-day life. This way, your lifestyle does get a little better over time, which matters for genuine enjoyment, while your gap still widens instead of staying flat. Second, notice when an upgrade is driven by comparison rather than genuine need or genuine joy. Before any major lifestyle increase, a bigger apartment, a nicer car, an upgraded version of something you already own, ask yourself honestly whether you're upgrading because it adds real, lasting value to your life, or because someone around you recently got something similar and it quietly shifted your internal sense of normal. There's no shame in wanting nice things. The goal isn't deprivation. The goal is making sure your upgrades are chosen deliberately, not triggered automatically by comparison running in the background of your mind. Third, be intentional about who you're comparing yourself to. Since humans evaluate wealth relative to the people around them, the people you surround yourself with, both in real life and on social media, quietly shape your sense of what counts as enough. If your feed is full of people showcasing luxury upgrades, your internal baseline for normal will keep climbing even if your actual life hasn't changed at all. This doesn't mean cutting people out of your life. It means being aware that comparison is happening constantly, often without your permission, and consciously choosing not to let someone else's highlight reel quietly redefine your own sense of financial peace. Fourth, automate the gap so willpower doesn't have to fight it every single month. The moment a raise or bonus arrives, set up an automatic transfer into savings or investments before that money ever sits in your regular spending account, waiting to be absorbed into upgrades. This single habit removes the need for constant willpower, because money that's already moved out of sight rarely gets spent on lifestyle creep. It's far easier to protect a gap you never see than to resist spending money that's sitting right in front of you every day. Fifth, redefine what feeling rich actually means to you on your own terms, rather than letting it be defined by whatever number feels just out of reach. Feeling rich was never really about touching some magical number. It's about having a gap that gives you breathing room, choices, and the ability to handle a surprise expense without panic. Once you experience that feeling, even at a modest income, you'll recognize it's available far earlier than most people assume, and it has very little to do with how impressive your salary sounds to other people. Put these 5 habits together, and something genuinely shifts. You stop running on a treadmill that adjusts its speed to match your effort, and you start actually moving forward, even if the pace feels slower than chasing one more raise, one more promotion, one more income milestone that was always going to feel exactly as insufficient as the last one. Here's the idea worth sitting with long after this video ends. The reason earning more money so often fails to make people feel rich isn't a flaw in those people, and it isn't a flaw in money itself. It's simply how the human brain is wired to measure wealth. Not as a fixed number, but as a constantly shifting comparison against where you used to be, against the people around you, against whatever feels just slightly out of reach. This means chasing a bigger number alone, without ever addressing the gap between what comes in and what goes out, can turn into a lifelong race against a finish line that quietly moves forward every time you get close to it. Not because the finish line is cruel or unfair, but because it was never really fixed in place to begin with. It was always being generated by you, recalculated in real time, based on whatever your life looked like most recently. But here's the empowering flip side of this entire idea. If feeling rich was never really about the size of the number, then you don't actually need an extraordinary income to experience it. You need a gap, a real protected distance between what you earn and what you spend. One that widens deliberately instead of closing automatically every time your paycheck grows. So the next time a raise arrives, or a bonus lands in your account, or you finally hit that income milestone you've been chasing for years, pause before the treadmill speeds up without your permission. Ask yourself, quietly and honestly, whether this new money is about to disappear into the next invisible upgrade, or whether it's finally going to widen the gap that actually creates the feeling you've been chasing all along. Because the goal was never to outrun the treadmill by moving faster and faster forever. The goal was always to step off it, on your own terms, whenever you're ready. And that single decision, more than any raise, any promotion, or any number you were taught to chase, is what actually makes someone feel rich.